I was asked to give a speech at Virginia Tech University earlier this year, and 10 days later I was disinvited, and which was bad enough. But what really upset me even more was that after I was disinvited, the school said, you couldn't have been disinvited because you were never invited in the first place. And that's when I decided to push back and make public the original email invitation, and then really social media took it from there, and talk radio, and a bunch of other people stepped in, including Fire, which I was very appreciative of their support at that time. And then I was ultimately reinvited to speak at the school, and said I'd do so long as you issue another statement saying that I was in fact invited and then disinvited. And once they did that, I agreed to speak again, and so I'll be back there in the spring.
Yeah, you wrote an opinion piece for the Wall Street Journal. It's published on May 3rd, talking about this scenario. Let's take a step back. Why would anyone want to disinvite you in the first place?
Well, I think there are a couple things going on here. I think that there is an attempt on college campuses to shield students from conservative viewpoints in general. And I write from the perspective, I'm an opinion journalist who writes from the perspective of an unabashed free market conservative. So I think there is an attempt to shield students from conservatives in general, but black conservatives in particular. I think there is still a notion, alive and well, particularly on the left, that blacks are supposed to think certain ways about public policy. And nowhere is that notion more vigorously reinforced than on our college campuses, where if you are an independent black thinker who steps out of line, you are not only wrong, you are a sellout, you are an Uncle Tom, you are a traitor to your race. And I think that the identity politics of the left is very dependent on black groupthink to maintain their black support, and that's why they see black independent thinkers in particular as such a threat. But what was interesting was that I was not invited to speak about race. I was invited to give a speech about capitalism. I was invited by the business school to give an annual lecture.
And this is, I think, really important for people to understand, at least people who are trying to advocate for change on campus with regards to free speech. A lot of pushback from other faculty members and from alumni.
Yeah.
You had one political science professor at King University who wrote to Virginia Tech saying, "I will actively discourage my students from attending your graduate programs or from transferring into your undergraduate program in the future, and I will not write any letters of recommendation for anyone wishing to attend your program." You had someone say, "I am packing away my Virginia Tech apparel, canceling my plans to attend football games this fall. Don't ask for future donations to the university. You've got to be kidding me." And they go on and on and on.
Yeah, you seem to be suggesting that Virginia Tech's change of heart and the reinvitation had less to do, or maybe nothing to do, with them seeing the light in terms of the need and propriety of exposing their students to different points of view.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like that's what drove their change of heart here. It sounds like what drove their change of heart is a nightmare press situation.
Yeah.
The fact that I happen to have access to powerful, large media outlets like the Wall Street Journal, like Fox News. I had access to groups like FIRE and the National Association of Scholars who were willing to go to bat for me. And they changed their mind about this, not because they decided they had acted improperly, but because they decided that the press, the bad publicity, was taking its toll, and I find that sad.
Yeah,
sad, very sad. But I also want to add one thing very quickly. We like to talk about this in terms of of liberal censorship of conservatives. I always encourage people to take a look at that database, that disinvitation database that FIRE has been compiling over the years. It has more than 300 names in it. And yes, it does have a lot of conservatives, but you will also find names in there like Madeleine Albright, President Clinton's Secretary of State. You'll find
Bill Ayers.
60s radicals like Bill Ayers and Angela Davis. You'll find Marxist professors like Cornel West. This is not a problem exclusive to liberals, although, as Fire has noted, chances are, if you are disinvited or if there is a big to-do about you being invited, the complaints will come overwhelmingly from the left. And I think that is a function of the fact that left-wing progressives largely control the university these days. But we should, in fairness, note that it is not a problem exclusively.
No, it
of
is
the
not.
left.
And I happen to have some of those facts in front of me. So we've started collecting this data since 2000. And since 2000, we don't say this is comprehensive. This is just stuff that managed to come across our desk. We've uncovered 305 incidents in which students or faculty have pushed for speakers to be disinvited, of which 131 were successful. Of those 305 attempts, over half occurred since 2010. And this was where we get to your talk about how it comes from both the right and the left. Of the 305 disinvitation attempts, 175 came from the left, quote unquote left. We're doing our best to characterize it. And 101 came from the right. I think 538, this is sort of a statistical news organization, had a very interesting study, though, that in 2013 and 2014 commencement season, not a single Republican figure was invited to speak at the commencements of any of the top 30 universities or top 30 liberal arts colleges. In contrast, 25 Democratic political figures spoke at these same schools' commencements, 11 of whom gave the main address. So it doesn't exclusively come from the right or from the left, but it does seem like the statistics bear out that it comes more so from that. That's just maybe by the nature of the character of the university.
Oh, I think that has everything to do with it. And I think the situation has gotten more lopsided over the years in terms of ideological representation among professors on campus. I think.
And you talk about that in your op-ed.
Yeah, I mean, Marxists outnumber Republicans. Not liberals, Marxists outnumber Republicans on campus. And again, the problem is that this is going to affect outspokenness. It's going to affect the willingness of students to challenge views that they hear on campus if they think they're going to be shamed or worse by faculty and administrators. And that's not what we want. We want kids challenged outside of their comfort zone during their college years. We want them to sharpen their critical thinking skills. And when you have this sort of policing of speech on campus, it's hard for that to happen. I don't think we're doing these kids any favors, letting them live in these bubbles and treating them with kid gloves for 4 years on campus. That's not what the real world is like. There are no such thing as worries about microaggressions and safe spaces and trigger warnings in the real world. And I don't think kids are being properly prepared for the real world. I would go back to, we want kids to sharpen their critical thinking skills. We want them to learn how to break down arguments, take on different points of view, understand where other people are coming from. And the problem is that today these kids are taught, they're being taught what to think more than how to think, which I think is the initial. They're being indoctrinated instead of educated in many cases, and that's the initial problem. But they're also being taught to view people who disagree with them as not only wrong, but evil, not worthy of debating. They're taught that saying, "I'm offended," should end a conversation. They're not taught to, they mistake slogans for arguments. There's a push among some conservatives to get more conservative professors on campus. They want to somehow try and counterbalance the liberals on campus. And I'm very skeptical of this effort. I recall having a conversation with the economist Thomas Sowell, who's based at the Hoover Institution, but for many years taught economics at any number of schools, Amherst, UCLA, and other schools. And he tells a story about the end of the semester of a course he taught on Marx. And he said that a group of kids came up to him on the last day of class and said, Professor Sloll, we really enjoyed this course, but we still have no idea what you personally think about Karl Marx. And Sloll said, I considered that the highest compliment any student could ever pay me. Mm-hmm. It was not my job to tell them what I thought about Karl Marx. And I think Sloll has the right idea. I think that the goal should be to get politics out of the classroom, not to try and counterbalance conservative professors and liberal professors. I'd rather they keep their personal politics out of this.
That's
I think
interesting.
that should be the goal.
Do you think that points to trends on campus now where in order to really grapple with an idea, people need to know the identity of the advocate for that idea?
That's a very Marxist notion in and of itself. I mean, this came up when recently when Donald Trump was talking about the quote unquote Mexican judge overseeing the civil case concerning Trump University, that there's this sort of ethnic or racial determinism at play, and people can only act and think in ways that groups as part of their identity. But you're right. I think there is a lot of that going on, and it does mostly come out of the left and the sort of identity politics that they practice. And I think it's very corrosive and not what a college education should be about. And I think there could be a lot of long-term damage being done here in the way these the way these students are being instructed in these matters.